so the impact of the recession was really very uneven and depended very heavily upon education and specific skills. One of the things that we're now seeing, and this is a factor really just in the last 6 to 9 months, has been that these numbers are now, I don't want to call them converging, but they are moving back closer to one another. And so people in this category, well-educated, still have fairly low unemployment rates. This number has come down from 18% to, I'm going to say this with air quotes, only 11%. Still very high, still uncomfortable, but it's a heck of a lot better than the 18 or 25 or whatever the number was previously. So we see that there was an issue at the time of the financial crisis, exacerbated by the recession, and we're still not out of this problem. It's also seen in terms of median income. I'm sure you've all heard and read that average income, and we're talking about median income for US households, peaked during the Clinton administration when adjusted for inflation. It's a fact. What we're doing in this slide is showing the different experiences based upon the educational level of the head of household. And I think you can see that just the way there was enormous divergence by level of education for the unemployment rate, there's a very significant divergence in income by the level of education. So if we take a look at the bars near me, families, bachelor's degree and higher, they basically haven't lost. They're back to where they were on average, and we can take a slice and dice approach by industry and show that there are a number of industries where people are doing quite well. Technology, for example, high-level healthcare, other examples, and so on. And then you can take a look at the worst category, where, by the way, there hasn't been much change because much of the income for people in the really poorly educated category, a lot of that is transfer payment. Where we see the real pain is in these middle categories. People who have a high school diploma or some college. These are the people who have experienced the following. Number one, their unemployment rates moved up notably. Their income has not kept pace with inflation. And I would add that we also know from other information provided by the Fed and others over the last several months, as they've gotten the historical data in, that it's this category that had the big balance sheet problems. So whether it was being overextended on credit cards, overextended often with subprime mortgages, and overextended on, I hate to say it, student debt. This is where the pain was. I'd also like to step away from the national numbers for a moment and talk about the student debt numbers for the state of New York. Very interesting work done by the New York Fed in which they looked at this really vexing issue of student debt. And what they found is about half of the debt is associated with educational institutions. I use that expression with some reservation. Educational institutions which are not accredited institutions, but basically vocational training institutes that promise that they will train up people to become either technology repair people or work in medical technology. They encourage their students often to borrow more money than the level of tuition, and then they don't provide coursework that's commensurate with what they need to know, and they don't provide basically placement services. This is an enormous problem that accounts for about half of the student loans in the state. This, to me, is not a situation where a French literature major goes to a good school and then graduates and can't get a job in French literature. This is not that problem. This is a very different problem and one that I think deserves more attention than it's been getting to this point.